fast this morning.
It did.
It's mine did too.
So does everybody have the documentation for the workshop here?
I got it.
One of the things I didn't make enough copies for everybody because I've already handed a bunch of them out, but maybe we could share that. This one is, so I'll start at the beginning. So I had to pick a couple topics for the workshop, and I tried to pick the ones that I thought were the biggest things we had to make decisions on. So two of the most expensive things for the facility are leachate and our waste disposal. Our waste disposal contract's expiring soon. And we have to make a decision on which disposal location we're going to choose. When I ran the numbers, I basically gave us the latitude to pick any of them because they were close in costs. The thing is that you have an option for like and I know that the interlocal agreement doesn't allow for a 10-year contract, but they're giving us a 10-year contract option, which could be structured in a way where it could be renewed whatever it has to be compliant or and kosher with the interlocal agreement. But at least we would get the terms, we would get kind of the benefit of a long-term forecast of what the costs are. So that's the financial side of that. The other side is the MRC. You know, you're looking at a different model where you're kind of, I'll call it, for lack of better terminology, you're synergizing, or it's almost like a union type of group where everybody's working together, trying to resolve a problem that eventually will have to be resolved because there's so many towns that are involved in the MRC. They just got a buyer, or they got a man, is it on the new partner, working partner, right? And it looks like, you know, they're going to be moving forward with improving the processes that are already there, maybe expanding on or altering some of them. But I guess the high level thing to look at is from a hierarchy standpoint, you're at waste management, you're taking waste, you're putting it in a landfill. Okay. That's really all you're doing with you know, the MRC or this coastal enterprises, or whatever you want to call it at this point. They're actually making an attempt to take the materials based on the market and reduce the volume of those materials and only landfill what's left over. So there's at least some effort into minimizing the amount of waste that's landfilled, completely landfilled. So, you know, ultimately, that will end up being a better model as time goes on. And I think you only get so many bites at the apple to get back into the MRC, and it'll get more costly to do that. So those are some of the pros and cons, and I'm sure everybody else will be able to think about some other things that are beneficial to being a part of the MRC, or just going straight with waste management. You know, straight with waste management, you know what you're getting. You're getting this and you're putting it in the landfill. The MRC, well, you're not really sure how the model is going to all pan out, but ultimately, if it doesn't pan out, you're still putting the waste in the landfill. But if it does pan out, you know, you have the upside of it is there could be potential opportunity for sending your recycling there. There could be potential opportunities for cost sharing with the commodities that they generate from some of the waste streams that they're able to pull out of the waste stream. And then there's also the potential for there to be cost savings if they're putting less waste in the landfill. So those are the things that you have to think about. And then there's also the perception of what you're doing with your waste, what the general public thinks about it. You know, a lot of people really don't like just landfilling all their waste. They want to see that there's an effort being made to kind of take reduce the waste stream before it's put in a landfill. Landfills are a finite resource. You don't want to be just sticking it in a landfill if you can take out half the material. If you look at any of the people that do this for a living and make money at it, the way they make money is they take in the waste, they take out the good stuff, and they only sell the bad. They only get rid of the bad stuff, and that's how they make money. That's kind of the model MRC is using. They're not in the business of. They're not like a business, so to speak. You know, they're an entity working for a group of municipalities, so to speak. That's just kind of the backdrop to that. The leachate part, you know, if you start, we just got our last quarterly leachate bill. And it's $75,000. Okay, a quarter. So do the math, that's $300,000 a year. Okay. If we pump like we're pumping right now, the gut worked for a little while, but what's happened is I think is our water level in the North Quarry is raised above where the gut was actually sealed up, and water's starting to work its way through back into the landfill now. So now we're pumping again, just like we were before. Wow. So the only thing we really are gonna be able to do to minimize that is a couple things, which we're gonna have to do, is we're gonna have to put pumps in the North Quarry immediately and start pumping some of that water out of stormwater before. There's some language in the documentation that's already been approved, but it's one of these things where I can ask and they could say no, or I could do it. Then they could say you did something wrong. It's one of those kind of gray areas where it's probably better to maybe we're thinking maybe get the old language that talked about pumping the North Quarry, having CV and Mahar maybe wrap it into the annual report, I mean the operations manual, and then do it. And then you can say, I sent the operations manual in. I already told you I was going to do it. It's right here. That's one way of covering yourself for doing something like that. I also will need to talk with the stormwater person who's probably going to be coming in on the 30th. So that's the cost of the leachate, and that's some of the reasoning why the leachate's is so expensive. The other part is that this is a cost that's only gonna increase over time. So just think if it's, let's say we're stuck with 300,000 a year, it's only gonna incrementally get higher as time goes on. So in 15 years, when the landfill's full, you have no more revenue coming in, you're gonna be paying, you know, 300,000-400,000 a year and something that you're getting nothing out of. And the towns are all gonna have to contribute to that are part of that landfill. So that's a big, that's a hard pill to swallow when you're not getting anything out of it. Right now, you get something out of it. You've got a place to put your dental debris. Down the road, you won't have that. So even when I was in Rockland, my ultimate goal was set up a system that could handle the leach. First thing is seal the landfill up, keep the precipitation out of going into the landfill, because that's half your water. So now you're only dealing with your groundwater, right? In this case, it's a little trickier because you get the North Quarry tied into it. So that's the first step. The second step will be, you know, figuring out a way of treating your leachate on site so that it can be discharged as stormwater. It's the only way to make this facility financially, you know, acceptable, I guess, for people, because otherwise it's just going to be this huge cost. And everybody's going to be like, why are we sending, you know, whatever, $50,000 a year to make us solid waste for water that, you know, we're pumping to the treatment plant? And it
That's
probably,
big enough to drink.
yeah, it already, you know, it's pretty close to being clean. You know, the constituents in the leachate, there's two of them that we've identified, and one of them's iron, and the second one is nitrogen. So those are two different processes to eliminate those two contaminants in the waste stream. So when I was at Fisher Engineering, I ran a small treatment plant operation, and it was probably as big as this table, maybe a little bigger. And that was designed to take out the metals. So what this system, and I'll let Brad, he might be able to speak a little bit more to this, but what this would entail is you would have a small type of physical chemical type of system, which is just for lack of, you know, just looking at it from a higher level is basically raising and lowering pHs and precipitating out the metals, which then go into a sludge press, which generates a waste stream of sludge cake, which it's easy to deal with. It's not a lot. It's something to do on a daily basis. It takes about 2 hours. But that would take out the iron portion of it. So you'd have a front end to this wastewater treatment process. At the front end, you probably have to have a grade 3 wastewater treatment license, which, you know, I have, but we could get somebody else to get that. And then you could, once you've taken out the iron, then your second component, that constituent that's in the leachate that we'd have to address is the nitrogen, and that's a biological process that needs to happen to get rid of that. So this, what they're talking about, so when I started seeing the leachate bills, I started thinking, geez, so, you know, I really want to look at a process that can eliminate, you know, the need for sending all that to the treatment plant. And I talked with Allison a little bit about it. So I started looking at some companies out there that can do this, and there's a company, this is the company that does it. They do it all around the country. There's two, the biological process basically is a leach field with aeration. And the aeration is required because we're in a cold weather climate. I really wanted to do something called a nutrient sediment control system, which is all biological plants, marsh grasses, and those kinds of things. But because we're in a cold weather climate, when you get into the winter months, you know, you don't have the same effect because you don't have the plants that can uptake a lot of the nitrogen and do the things that need to be converted. So what you'll do is you're really relying on basically like a treatment plant type of system, or like your own home leach field with the bugs in it, and you aerate it and you kind of give them air, which keeps them activated throughout the winter months, you know, metabolizes or processes the nitrogen and then discharges it as a stormwater. So that's the general overview of the two topics that we probably need to discuss. Brad Granley is the person I started talking to, and he's from a company called Leachate Management Systems, and he put together this overview. So when I called him, I said, you know, I take care of a landfill in Maine, and he kind of dismissed it at first. He's like, you know, we really don't take on anybody unless we know the home run. And I said, okay. He says, so I sent him all the stuff, and I sent him our treatment plant license or our stormwater license. And he said, he got back to me with his wetland specialist and said, yeah, this is really doable. And we have the property to do it. You know, the costs are somewhere between, he's estimated between $550,000 and $700,000. And the operational costs, you know, can be, what does he say, between $50,000 and $30,000 a year, and with $5,000 possibly of electrical bills and jetting of pipes annually, which is pretty simple. So the way what I see what would have to happen is, you know, each day someone would, let's talk about what would you have to do to run this thing. So once it's all up and running, let's say, and we installed it, you'd have to go and check it, check off the checklist, and check all the, you know, pHs of the different areas where you're taking out the iron, check the sludge press, clean the sludge press. That'd take a couple hours, and then probably monitor the outfall, check that. So that might be an annual thing, that might be a weekly thing. I don't know. It depends on what the people from the DEP want for the stormwater. But then annually you would have to, this leachate, basically it would be a leach field, and they would make it so that the ends of the pipes could be exposed and you could just jet them out annually instead of like our leach fields. We don't do that, right? We just leave them all connected and buried. They would be exposed with cleanouts on the end, and you clean those things out annually. Then, you know, you'd have some of the costs of replacement of blower motors over time and that kind of thing. But you know, you're talking operational costs of, you know, we'll say $40,000 a year versus $300,000 a year, or call it $200,000 a year. General rule of thumb in any, you know, any business that you work at, you know, it's a 3-year payback on an investment. You know, it's $700,000 at the high end to build this thing, and currently our leachate costs of $300,000. It's kind of a no-brainer from that standpoint. The political part is a different thing, which, you know, you got to think about that part of it too. So, you know, you can put a really good spin on this, and you could say, look, we're treating this at a higher level than the treatment plant's treating it now. On the other hand, somebody also could say is that you're pumping water out of the landfill and you're discharging it over into the brook. I mean, these are just realities of what could be, it's part of what could happen.
Overflows at the yacht club now, and there's a
Right.
manhole in it, right?
Right, right, but people say things that aren't true all the time, so we'd have to get out front of
Well,
this.
don't like come up with a,
Oh,
that's, nobody's
just-
saying that we're dumping water into,
I'm thinking about all this ahead of time, and I want to get out front of it if we're gonna do this, so that we educate people that, we put a positive spin on this, if this is something we're gonna do. And we don't just do it and then say, oh yeah, we're pumping this stuff in, oh yeah, by the way, we did this. We would really want to put a lot into educating people, I think, in the beginning, if we were gonna do something like this. I don't have much more to say other than that on those two topics. You've been given all the information in regards to the leachate treatment process and what are the next steps, and we can talk to Brad about the next steps. It says next steps on the second page on the back. And then the second one is the discussion items that you should be prepared for to vote on at the next next board meeting. In regards to whether or not you want to pursue a contract with MRC, or if you are interested in something with waste management. The offer for waste management expires. It says 4/30/23. Because we couldn't get this workshop in earlier, he gave us until the end of this month. So we have a meeting before the end of this month to make a decision on at least that. If you don't do that, you still have roughly a year left on the contract. And then you could look at trying to negotiate with waste management at that point, but you hold you have no leverage at that point. They're offering us something now, they might offer us something better, I don't know. It's just that's the handle belt right now that we have to look at. So
Dave, are these the only two options on that? Are they the only two that are
the only thing I could
viable?
So I think that they're the only viable ones. We talked with Perk, they're letting people come and go, but I don't see that as being a long-term option. Eco Maine says we don't want your waste. They said, we had a slot for you and we gave it to somebody else. We would give it to you if you gave us all the recycling, got rid of your recycling program. Which I know that nobody wanted to do that at this point. And so I was just like, all right, no room. And then he came back and he said, well, maybe we can do this kind of switching thing where waste management gives us some of their waste down there, we take some of our waste, and that ends up going to Boardwalk anyway, but we pay Eco Maine. And I thought that was kind of a cheesy thing. That's kind of a hard thing to explain to anybody, that.
Well, what will it
The
cost?
curly shuffle they call it, right?
Yeah. The reason that I asked that is it's really not set in stone that MRC is going to be up and running. And with that track record, I mean, yeah, they have partners, but they're struggling.
Well, they've got an
It's
agreement,
early, and it's early on.
they've got an agreement with the disposal location up in Orange. That's ultimately where what it would end up. Let's say MRC, the worst thing if you went to the MRC is the MRC, let's say it failed, just it can't, there's too many people involved. Too many municipalities involved, they have to do something. So ultimately, what would happen is they would just landfill the waste anyway. But you probably pay more for it.
Which is what they've been doing, right?
Which is what you do,
Since.
It's the same thing that we're doing right now, just through the MRC.
right? So I mean, the costs are roughly not much more, I don't know, I'm not gonna. This is why we're having the workshop, right?
Yeah.
So to talk about these things, because they're hard decisions. And no one will really know what the good is until it's all done, said and done down the road.
Do we have concrete numbers from the MRC? Would they be willing to give us
Well,
that at this point? I know that a while back they had said, oh, it's gonna this kind of a range, but would they take us and guarantee
we haven't been given a guaranteed number. So the only thing we could do is, if we were gonna do that, is talk to the executive director over there and see if they would give us an all-in number for whatever period of time or whatever the conditions are and being involved or being part of that group. And, that would be something that we could possibly maybe get by the next board meeting. To help with the decision, but at least you guys or everybody here will be more informed when you go to the meeting to decide to vote. You know, you'll have the information that you probably need to vote.
The other reason that I asked that question is I just hate for us to be so limited. But you know what I mean, on choice.
The only other option, I never brought this up, but you could go to New Brunswick, Canada. That's really, that's not really, it's not really an option. It's too far away. Trucking will kill you. I mean, that's the other option, if you're gonna say all options. That's where they're trucking the sludge right now. A lot of the sludge is going to New Brunswick, Canada.
From here,
Yeah, probably.
Ferrera, I think that's what he'll do.
Yeah,
what's going on in New Brunswick, Canada?
I bet they have a landfill there, no, PFAS isn't a problem.
Really?
Great. Send them our PFAS.
Right?
Well, it's just a matter of time, that'll backfire.
Right.
Okay. Interesting, that's very, very interesting. How are we doing on time for this guy?
Oh, yeah, can everybody,
You got about
with
5?
mind, like keeping an eye on this
Yep.
here, if we see somebody come up in the
Okay.
waiting room. Sometimes I miss it, but there's nobody.
Does anybody have any questions for Dave on any of that stuff? Josh?
I have a question about the on-site leachate treatment. Do we know the lifetime that the that it was,
System.
yeah, that system?
That's a good question to ask, possibly Brad.
Okay.
He doesn't have his wetland specialist on, he's with his parent, he's on vacation right now with his parents, they're older, so. He's gonna be on a flight, he wasn't able to make it, but Brad, he's one of the members or owners, I think, of the company. He texted me and just said, let him know. When we're ready for him. So let me know when you want to bring him on.
Well, I think with your presentation right there, even without us having a lot of interaction about it, I think we're ready to ask some questions to him, which may bring on some more. If everybody agrees with that, if he's reached out to you, I mean,
I mean,
right,
do you guys think this is,
it's a lot to,
My question would be, why haven't we done it already?
Right.
If the technology is, if this has been around for a while.
it's not, it hasn't been around a long time.
Okay.
And,
That would
and
be
I
good.
have a little bit more of a background in this, so it's not something you just. It's not something you just think of like that. not when you're
Well,
running-
no, I know, but I mean, if it's something that entities like ours do, it's just because,
It's a good question for him, they're doing it.
and, you know, if this was a business, it would be a no-brainer that you would have this in-house, just because of the sheer cost saving.
It's a good question to ask him, because I asked him the same question, you
Why
know.
haven't we done it? I mean, I would say there's a little bit of a,
Who regulates, the DEP regulates the number that you can put in the stormwater, is that what?
The DEP, well, we have a stormwater discharge license, and we have parameters that we have to meet to do that, so, you know.
Well, I
this-
thought that stuff we was pumping is almost that clean already.
Well, that's what Allison said, and it's true. But there's a
doesn't
lot,
violate any primary drinking water standards, is
Right.
what the report says every year.
but what they could do is
So
they
why
could say,
can't we pump right there?
they could try and make us test for things that are, God doesn't even know exists, you know what I mean? That's what they could do, and they could chase us down a hole where we could never make it happen. That's one of the things that could happen. Because they don't like the idea of it. Well, but the thing is I think in reality, they have to understand that this is gonna have to be pumped forever. So it's in their best interest that we develop a system that they could actually regulate on site that actually takes care of it. Because what happens in the past, some of these landfills that are managed and then get filled up is the people walk away from them and they say, we're not pumping that anymore,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't want that to happen. So if we can't control our costs at the facility, or if we can control our costs at the facility, we're much more likely to be able to manage what's going on there. As opposed to if those costs get away from us, you know, the towns are notorious for saying, we're not gonna do this anymore. We're just not gonna do it, you know, sue it, you know, and
so, one question as we talk, I think about, is this, much like a town with stuff that towns do, something like this, obviously, we're trying to keep the earth clean with what we're doing, or do the best that we possibly can. Does this qualify for a grant or some type of a thing like that?
It's possible,
You know what I mean?
possible. Possible, but this is the beginning discussion
Yeah.
on doing this. And I don't want to waste my time on it if nobody's in favor of doing it. And if people don't want to think it's a good idea, I'm moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I'm putting it behind me and I don't want to waste.
No, but I've said to pump it in the storm drain from day one.
Why wouldn't it be, why wouldn't it be worth pursuing?
So,
All kinds of reasons.
Pump it in the
People
other
have,
quarry,
people are all
quarry,
from a different place and, you
liquidate
know, they
it,
might think that like. They might feel more comfortable that it goes to the
we'd
tree.
have to test it.
Just from a cost saving.
If it's already
And
unclean,
there's two things here.
It shouldn't take much.
Getting it right. And the cost savings over time.
It's
I would
huge.
think it is huge.
Huge.
At least these numbers indicate.
Oh, yeah, that,
I mean, you saw the audit this year, right? I mean, the audit numbers changed a lot because it was based on our
Long-term post-closure costs.
that was what killed us. So if we don't correct that, we're gonna be,
And the Camden rates are just gonna keep going up, at least some. And so I think that's probably part of the reason it wasn't done before is because the rates in Camden felt like semi-manageable. I also wonder if sometimes there's like a little bit of a conflict of interest with Camden. You know, it's a significant revenue. There's a generator for the town of Camden. Like there might be Camden representatives that would sit here and be like, oh no, we gotta keep scenarios for free. You know, it'll make it, if Micro Solid Waste succeeds, it's gonna make Camden rates go up even more. Like I'll pay more for my sewer bill, but it's the right thing to do. And hopefully maybe the DEP would be more inclined to let us do it also because Camden's having so many problems with overflows in that part of town too. So, but one reason before there's this old report from Emery and Garrett.
He's there.
Oh, good. They had done all this analysis about where the water should go and how we could save money over time. And when they were initially gonna send some water over to Camden, the Camden town officials at the time didn't want water from the North Quarry going to Camden because it was discolored at the time. But so they said no to it, even though the DEP said yes. Let's see.
Austin, do you mind if I fix the camera? It's very perfect.
You go. No.
It's bothering me. A lot.
take it right now if you want.
Can you hear us okay, Brad?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, I can.
hold on, we can't hear you though.
so he's having, I believe tornado warnings going through his. So he might have to kick out. That was what he told me to let you
I'm
guys.
not sure why we can't.
Are you able to hear me?
Check the speaker.
No, again, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have mute.
Oh, you're just talking on that.
He's he looked muted.
There he is.
What
Can
is
you
it?
hear me now?
Unmuted.
The microphone.
Probably on our end.
Yeah, you get that part.
Does seem to be on our end.
Cause even my microphone things go up and down. Oh,
Can
and
you,
you,
Josh, can you see if can you turn up press the volume up button on the?
Right here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
oh, she messed it up.
Okay. Brad, can you?
Can you try to
Can you
speak?
speak?
Yep, I can. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we have you now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, well, I can't really sing, so I'm only gonna be able to talk for the test, so that'll have to do.
Hi, Brad. So maybe just like an introduction to who you are and your company, and maybe you can just talk about how I approached you and what we talked about and what the objective was. And then we can kind of talk about just real high level what the process is.
Mhm.
And then maybe, then we could maybe talk a little bit, then there'll maybe be some questions on, where this has been used before and, whatever else maybe some people will come up with. So everybody here are either town managers or members of the board. So the transfer station or the solid waste facility as a whole is made up of 4 towns. And they have a board that basically makes decisions on how all of the facility operates and is funded. With input from the town managers, they have an interlocal agreement that kind of governs how all the things have to be done, and for lack of I can't come up with anything else. So that's the introduction I'll give. So I'll hand it over to you, and maybe you can talk about your company and whatever else you think is important.
Sure, yeah, I'll keep introduction short. We can always get into details of our company or references or anything folks want, when and if that's appropriate. But again, my name is Brad Granley, president and founder of Leachate Management Specialists. I'm leaning on nearly 30 years of experience as an environmental engineer. A lot of my work was in soil and groundwater remediation projects in the first half of my career, and then kind of accidentally got in the solid waste industry and started this company actually 10 years ago in March of this year. So it's always nice to get to those milestones. And we really specialize on what we call natural systems. And so our 3 core technologies are using phytoutilization technology. So we take plants, put them on top of landfills that have high transpiration capacity, highly tolerant to the contaminants in harsh leachate. And we essentially use the plants and leverage the evapotranspiration capacity to drink up that liquid so our clients don't have to haul it off site. So if we can dispose of leachate on site, you really are in control, and you're not dependent on being cut off for whatever reasons at the wastewater treatment plant. You're not at the mercy of fuel surcharges with truckers and increasing prices simply because it's hard to find CDL drivers these days. So that's one of the main advantages of our natural systems. Another one is called wind-aided intensified evaporation. In that system, we leverage wind and passively evaporate leachate or other industrial wastewaters on by creating a large density of wetted surface area in a small footprint. And then with wetlands, obviously, we're leveraging different natural processes with biodegradation of contaminants to make sure that we're removing what the contaminants are of concern. And those mechanisms are different depending on if it's ammonia, VOCs, metals, if it's a metal that is better, more easily precipitate under aerobic or anoxic conditions. And so we create the environment to try to pull those contaminants out. And wetlands are better at certain things than others. If David had come to me and said, hey, we want to put in a wetland to take care of some color issues, some UV interference issues at the wastewater treatment plant, to remove some salts, I would say, I can't help you. Thanks for calling. But that's really not what what a wetland system is good at. What you really focus on with wetlands are nutrients. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and VOCs we can pull out pretty easily, and various metals. And again, it's manipulating what oxidation state a given metal might be in to induce those conditions to be able to pull those out. So in a nutshell, that's kind of our company motto is just aligned with natural systems, leveraging natural processes to solve practical problems. Some of the big advantages of our approaches are that we're able to, again, put that control in the landfill owner's lap instead of being at the mercy of truckers and wastewater treatment plants. And to really, our systems, they're not no maintenance. So I don't want to give that impression, but they're low maintenance. And so once they're installed, it doesn't take a highly skilled technician to operate them, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. They don't have to be babysat. We have wetland systems, phyto systems, et cetera, in the field, and some of them go weeks at a time without anyone even checking on them. In those cases, we'll typically have a PLC control panel and be able to remotely monitor and get alarms if something happens. But with a wetland system, you don't necessarily even need a PLC control panel. In your scenario where you're looking at getting rid of ammonia, more than likely we're looking at an aerated wetland. So we would have 1 or 2 small blowers, and then we have a distribution manifold that's at the base of a wetland. And I'm sure you guys know already, but an engineered wetland or constructed wetland is not a natural wetland. You excavate out and you line it with geosynthetic material. You'll put down at the base of that your mechanism for delivering that oxygen, and so it's equally distributed across that area that your water is cross flowing over the top. And then we put in media, and the media is just typically what is most readily available and cost effective locally, so different types of gravel. And then as you aerate that really what happens is you induce the conditions for the biology to happen, so that the microbes grow on the surfaces, the surface area that we create with the different with the media that we put in. And that's where those reactions occur, for example, with ammonia for the nitrification, denitrification process. And don't be fooled, because in wetlands, we have this image of plants, and plants are good. We can install the plants in the wetland, but it's primarily that surface area, the reaction area that those bugs adhere to, the microbes adhere to, where the action takes place. And so a system, for example, and if you want, I can pull up a diagram on my screen for the most recent wetland system that we put in. It has 3 different stages. The first one is where the anoxic leachate enters one portion of the wetland, and these are all sectioned separately. And so that's where it comes in. It's anoxic, and it essentially flows through that into the second stage, which is the aerated process. And so that's where you have your nitrification process, where your ammonia is degraded with the right microbes. And then we have a large recirculation component back to the anoxic side, where the denitrification process takes place. And then it's circulating between the first 2 stages. And then typically we'll have a third stage where you're more likely to have plants. And that's where you have polishing, where you'll have sedimentation that, if you oxidate iron or other metals, they're more likely to settle in that third stage before you discharge. So I guess I kind of went through a lot of the questions that you had, David, but kind of in a nutshell, that's who we are as a company. That's our motto. My experience I listed, and that's the nuts and bolts of what we would anticipate a system for you guys would look like if it were to proceed.
So one of the other components was the iron portion.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we talked about the constituents in the leachate is the iron portion more of an upfront type of treatment that we have using physical chemical treatment that we were going to do, or are you thinking that the actual, for lack of better terminology, kind of a leach field type of system is going to take care of both of those components? I think from what I remember, we had an upfront process, right?
Yep, for iron removal, we would have an upfront aeration process, and essentially, if you oxygenate it, you change the state of iron to change it from a dissolved state to a precipitate. And then that's how you get the orangish color that we're also familiar with. And then you just need the appropriate retention time for the settling of that to occur before you move on to the next stage.
So that's
if you'd like.
That's part of the overall kind of next steps and proposal that we would put together, right? If we were going to do this, that would incorporate both components, right? The upfront process and the back end, we'd call it.
Yeah. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah.
I'm not in presentation mode because I have another screen attached, and then it'll mess it up. But this is an example of iron sedimentation. And so the aeration in this case, if you look on the left-hand side of that slide, it's essentially running the water down corrugated pipe. And that's enough aeration to trigger that reaction to change the oxidation state of iron. And then you can see they have, in this particular landfill, they have a boom, and then that helps to settle the iron. And then there's clarification as it settles. This is actually a project in Freeport, Bahamas. So, I had to sacrifice for the company and go there once in a while. But half the time it was in July. So it wasn't like I was escaping winter. And just so you guys know, I live in Denver, so we have winter here, not as harsh as yours, but I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota on the tip of Lake Superior. So I'm plenty familiar with how things work in the cold. So here is a layout of a typical wetland system from left to right. That's your stage 1 anoxic pond that I mentioned. Stage 2 in the middle is the aerate, and then the stage 3 is with the plants. And on this figure, it's in reverse order because that's how it was laid out on the site. This is at the landfill down in Freeport, Bahamas. And it's actually a pretty unique project. I won't take up much of your time with it, but they had about 500,000 used tires just sitting on the island. And it took a lot of energy. Diesel fuel is very expensive on the islands and a lot of labor to chop these up. And it takes up critical land space, airspace on an island. So we had a creative design, nothing where there's any standards, but essentially what we did is we took and we shaped those tires into a berm and then lined over it. And then that became our berm for the different stages. And one of the main reasons that we did this was it was free material. And second, we know that this was in a flood zone for hurricanes. And we know that if we can secure these tires down, the next time a hurricane comes through, we won't have 500,000 tires floating around the island and in the ocean. And the timing of it couldn't have been much better. So in this photo, you can see we have it excavated out. Actually, we didn't do much excavation here because we could build a berm with those tires. But you can see the air distribution network, and we use drip tubing on this particular project. And so we can equally distribute that air across the basin. Here you can see the locally available media. And again, it's all about the surface area and it's like an attached biological growth reactor is what it turns into. This is the key for especially the ammonia degradation, which is one of the main key compounds of concern for your guys to make sure you can meet effluent limits. And so that's what we use there. Would have to look at what is the least expensive media that we could find in your particular area. And then here you can see how that bubbling works in the landfill. You can see the lines from left to right, and that's where the drip tubing is. And that again allows us to equally distribute that air to make sure that we're getting proper reactions and just aerating that liquid. One thing about this project is they did not have the money to build it to our specs. Typically, you would put enough of this media so that all of this liquid is submerged, because we were concerned about short circuiting across the top, and so they really didn't build it to our design. So we were quite concerned about that at first, but in the end, it turned out okay. Here you can see some more photos, and I apologize, I know it's kind of small on your screen, but top right is another photo of the drip irrigation. The top left is where we have started to put some dirt in our third stage, and then you can just see it operating on the bottom left. And on the bottom right, we have some aeration in that first stage, just with some essentially spray in the air just to start that aeration process. Hurricane Dorian came in shortly thereafter. Category 5 devastated the island, but the berm held. So even though there's no design standards, we took enough precautions to make sure it stayed in place, and we didn't lose 500,000 tires to the ocean. So that was kind of nice. Let me skip ahead to results. You can see in this graph the yellowish line, that's the influent of ammonia, and you can see it fluctuates quite a bit, and a lot of that's due to when they have the wet season, dry season. But we've had ammonia anywhere from 600 to nearly 1,400 parts per million. The red line on the bottom is hard to see. Our permit effluent limit is 50 parts per million, and then the blue is our effluent from that stage 2 aerated wetland, which is typically in the single digits. And so very, very effective treatment. Now, one thing to know, in your neck of the woods, the weather or the temperature affects the kinetics, so the reaction rates for how quickly you can achieve your degradation and to meet your desired effluent limit. And so we need to take that into account. So the size of your landfill to treat a certain pounds per day of ammonia would be larger than it would be in, say, Freeport, Bahamas, or in Florida. But that's all taken into account in the design stage. And Mark Leiner, my wetland specialist, he could answer all your questions better than I can, but I think I'm a decent pinch hitter, I hope. But he would say that when he ran his preliminary modeling, the total surface area was, I think, less than 2 acres for all this. And a big reason for that smaller area is due to the aerated wetlands. You could do this with a free water surface wetland without any blowers, and that still will work. But your transfer rate of oxygen from the atmosphere to the water is guided by Henry's law and just equilibrium principles, and you just don't have, it's just not very efficient. So it would be much, much larger, and your construction costs would be higher, but that would be a passive, less maintenance. With this type of system, you're going to have potentially a pump and 1 or 2 blowers, and that's really about it. And then that's the main process. And so it's pretty simple. So no maintenance, but pretty low maintenance. And so this is not the Freeport landfill, but you can see just a couple of other examples of what some wetlands look like. So this was for a conference that I presented in the Bahamas, and so that was why I have a nice light colored blue photo in there. But anyways, that might give you a little bit better idea of what these systems look like. And of course, I'm breezing over everything, but I think it gave you the basic idea. This is just a diagram of what an aerated wetland looks like. You can still put plants in. It's good for aesthetics, but it's not necessary for the reactions to occur. And I think that question often comes up, that, well, your plants are dormant or dead in the wintertime, and so how does the system still work? And the answer to that question is, it's not relying on the plants, it's relying on the microbes and the biology and the attached, those microbes attached to that surface area of the media. So in a nutshell, I can go back and show you other photos, but I just want to break and just see what questions that may spur with everyone, and see what other kind of questions you might have.
Josh?
So this will run year round, the water will freeze, the reactions will continue to occur throughout the winter?
Correct. The kinetics and the degradation rate will definitely decrease significantly. The closer you get to 0 degrees or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the lower those reaction rates are, but that's taken into account in the design. And I'm not sure, I think you're close enough to the coast that you don't necessarily have standing snowfall like we do in Minnesota. The snow actually acts as an insulator in that case. And I don't know that you're quite as cold as some of the systems that Mark has in northern Minnesota, but yes, the reactions will still occur. We just need to make sure that we properly design for that additional hydraulic retention time in the winter when we need more time before that leachate is passed through. And just so you know, the flow rates that you're talking about are relatively small from a wetland perspective.
All right.
What would be the average lifespan of a system like this in your estimate?
Oh, decades for sure. I think it would be more limited to how long your geosynthetic liner would last on the bottom. And that's not being driven over or I guess damaged in any way. So I guess that would be the typical lifespan, is however long that bottom liner geosynthetic material will last. And honestly, I'm not an expert on that. I could tell you something that would just be a guess, and I don't like to make guesses if I'm not knowledgeable in it. But from my understanding, at least 30 years is what that bottom would last. Then that would lead into probably your next question would be related to maintenance. There would be some maintenance involved with the wetland system, removing the iron sludge as that builds up, and potentially you would have to look at how much fouling or sediment builds up in the aerated wetland, because as you are aerating, you're precipitating different compounds, and you might have settling of different organics and just suspended solids. And so it's possible that you may have to excavate out a portion of where your main influent comes into the landfill to make sure that that's not clogging up and then getting short circuiting over the top. And Mark would have been a better person to answer the frequency of that. I would guess that might be a every 5 to 10 year type of activity. So not, we're not talking a quarterly or even yearly process. Certainly that could change based on your site specifics, but I guess that's a general rule of thumb without having dug further into the design.
Just a follow-up question with that. In your estimate or your vast knowledge, which seems like you have a bunch, does a landfill like this, when we stop adding to it over time, will this system basically take out less and less? So with the system meeting, in the 25th year, is there a lot less iron sludge ending up in the pond than there was in years 1 through 5?
Every landfill is different, of course, but at some point you see like a long-term equilibrium in the concentrations of different compounds as the landfill ages. There's kind of a bell curve on startup and then operation, and you have the highest concentrations, and that tails off to an equilibrium point. And I don't know where that'll be with respect to iron for you guys. And so and forgive me, David, is there groundwater intrusion on this as well? Or is it strictly from the landfill?
Almost all of it is groundwater intrusion. Well, we have a little
Okay,
bit.
that's what I thought. So based on that, I would imagine a lot of the iron is going to be background from your groundwater. I don't know that, but I would anticipate that you're probably closer to a steady state right now. And whatever we find over the next years for iron sludge might be consistent. In general, you would see the concentrations decrease over time, but you might not if it's driven from the content in your groundwater. And I just got a message that my internet is a little unstable. Our tornadoes are past, but we have another line of just thunderstorms coming through. So I apologize if I'm not coming through clearly.
Is there anything else? Anybody else got anything, Josh?
So, if PFAS is ever regulated, at wastewater treatment plants, and if we were required to, take this out of our water, is there a way to add that to the system?
Yes, there are. One of the other main items that we work with is we partner with a company called the Water and Carbon Group out of Australia, and they have what's called a foam fractionation system. And I can't guarantee that would be the best fit. And just being transparent, I don't care if that's something in our arsenal. If it's not the best fit for you guys, I wouldn't recommend it. Usually, what people first look at are activated carbon and ion exchange for PFAS removal. But usually with landfills and leachate, you'll clog up those beds too quickly for it to be viable. For you, because it's an old closed landfill and a lot of groundwater, I wouldn't count it out until it was specifically evaluated, so that could be an option. But traditionally with leachate, you're just going to clog up those beds too fast. And there's a preferential removal of different compounds prior to PFAS. That's one of the last compounds that would be absorbed from the carbon or the IX or ion exchange media. And so, yeah, there are different options, and foam fractionation is one of the key technologies that's out in the marketplace right now. And so essentially with that, we have the leachate pass through a fractionator. So if you've ever seen like a vessel that carbon is in, or like a water softener, imagine that, but just larger. And we have aeration in that through a diffuser, and then it's the crossflow of the leachate with the bubbles that we put through it that causes removal of the PFAS compounds. And PFAS compounds they're surfactants, so they have a hydrophilic and a hydrophobic end. The hydrophilic wants to stay dissolved in the water, in the polar compound, but there's a much larger driving force for the hydrophobic side for some reason to adhere to the surfaces of the bubbles. And so that's how we remove it. And honestly, as an engineer and scientist, when I first was vetting the technology to see if we wanted to partner with this company, I never would have thought that we would see the results that we have. But we've been in key PFAS compounds from hundreds and even thousands of parts per trillion down to single digit parts per trillion with just putting air through the leachate. And if I had ran the system, taken the samples and seen the results, I probably wouldn't believe it. But we're on our 5th major demonstration now, actually, for Casella. So you're familiar with Casella, obviously. We've run demonstrations for waste management, GFL, connections. We've got a couple systems, full-scale systems on order right now with Waste Connections, and so it's working. And that's the best tool that's out there right now. I would say that over the next 2 to 5 years, there will be a lot more technology development, especially in the PFAS destructive realm. A lot of those technologies you can read online, and what you're going to find in practice is that either they can't do quite what they say, or it's not financially feasible. But they're advancing fast, and I'm really excited for what those folks are doing for destructive technologies. And the destructive can often be paired at the tail end of the foam fractionation system, because our reject anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5% of the influent flow. And so it's a lot smaller volume to treat through the destructive technologies. The other option is reverse osmosis. If you guys put in an RO system, you'd be set for any contaminant. You'd be able to discharge directly. But you would have anywhere from 10 to 15 of a reject that you'd have to deal with from now through the end of however long the system would have to run. An RO system is a great option to consider for PFAS removal and any contaminant removal. And again, I'm just transparent from what's the best fit for anyone. So that would be something that would work for you guys. But again, they're probably going to be a lot more expensive for a 70,000 gallon a day system. I think the ballpark we gave for a wetland was what, David, 550 to 750 range. You'd be looking at probably $3 to $4 million for an RO system. Don't quote me on that because I'm not an RO specialist, but that's what it would take for capital cost. And there would be a lot more maintenance and skilled technicians that are working on it all the time. So just sharing the knowledge that I have of different technologies. So if that helps you at all, or if you have more questions about that or other technologies, I can probably give you an overview, but I wouldn't necessarily be an expert.
Allison?
Do you happen to know, right now our leachate is going to the Camden wastewater treatment plant, and that process is, what is it called?
It's a biological process, activated sludge.
So it's an activated sludge biological process. Do you have any idea like what maybe is being removed from our leachate, like how effective that process is for treating our leachate, knowing what you know about what's in it as compared to what we would be considering with you?
Sure. So most of the contaminants that you have in your leachate will be removed through a standard activated sludge wastewater treatment plant process. They won't remove, so the iron, they'll aerate up front and precipitate that, take it out. Some of the metals, the ammonia, that's taken care of without really much of a problem. I guess one of the issues is what's the capacity, and are there storm surges when you guys have rain events that make them not able to take all your leachate? But from a contaminant removal standpoint, it's going to be pretty good for what you have in your leachate. The wastewater treatment plant won't remove total dissolved solids or salts, and it won't remove PFAS. There'll be some removal of PFAS because we've seen PFAS compounds show up in the biosolids, which of course in Maine, as we know, have been banned from land application. So certainly some of that is coming out in the biological process, but there would be a decent majority, and I can't give you a number, but a decent amount of that PFAS compounds that would make it all the way through the plant and into wherever their discharge body is. And so if you do at some point have to treat PFAS, I think that you would have to, whether you're going to the treatment plant or whether you're discharging post a wetland. And so backing up to the one of the questions is, can we integrate this into a train in the MS? If it were an RO, a carbon system, or a foam fractionation system, you definitely would be able to put that in either upfront or post a wetland without really any problem. Integrating those together wouldn't be hard at all. So hopefully that answers your question on what your activated sludge process is likely to do.
And would this different system, would that work just as well? Would the water that comes out of there be just as clean as it is after going through the activated sludge process?
Yeah, we would be targeting the same contaminants to make sure that whatever your effluent limits are, that the system is designed to remove them. And if we came and did some additional analysis, one of my concerns with the wetland, again, just being transparent, is you have a certain number of parameters right now that are on your discharge permit for your stormwater. If you try to integrate your landfill leachate and you go to the state, they might say, well, what else is in your leachate? And they may add parameters onto your NIPD's discharge permit. At that point, we need to evaluate and say, all right, well, arsenic is in your leachate. Can we effectively remove arsenic from this stream with a wetland? And where's the evidence to back that up with research, with literature, with other systems that are in place? And so I would anticipate that would probably happen because, it's a natural question. If you're going to discharge something different, what else is in it that we might not want out into the environment? And so based on the data that we have so far and the parameters that you're currently monitored for, we think that, yes, we would be able to effectively remove those with a wetland system. So I can't answer that with 100% certainty. They might make you sample for everything under the sun, and then we would just have to look at what shows up and then reevaluate whether we think a wetland is the right answer or not.
I feel like we do already sample for everything under the sun.
Hmm.
There's a
I
list
think
that's like,
it's pretty extensive, yeah.
But I don't think I gave you the discharge, our treatment plant requires us to do quarterly monitoring. And I don't think I gave you that. I think, well, no, I did give you that, didn't I? No, I didn't. I can't remember. Yeah, I did give you that.
Yeah, so-
pages long.
Yeah.
With a wetland, we would, I mean, your discharge limits into the wastewater treatment plant are not, would be pretty easy for us to meet with a wetland. What we're trying to do is meet the same limits that they would have post the activated sludge sewage plant. So, those limits wouldn't really scare me at all.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Because I have a couple myself.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Throwing an obvious long-term savings, I'll throw that out. What would be the reason not to do a plan like you're proposing? What would be the advantage of staying and doing the same old thing we're doing? And
I guess there's not capital cost if you, I mean, it would depend on funding availability. Obviously, if this is 500 to 700 some thousand, which we would narrow down, of course, during a specific design practices. I mean, to keep doing what you're doing is, there's no capital cost.
no, but
I don't want to say that I can't think of other ideas why you shouldn't, because that makes me sound like I'm being biased, and I don't want to be that. I want to be as transparent as I can. But if we can treat the parameters that you have in your discharge permit, and your long-term maintenance is $15,000 to $30,000 a year, I think it was more in the 15 range from what Mark estimated. I mean, obviously, there's a huge delta there in the money to recoup your capital costs. So if we can meet the discharge limits on what your eventual permit would be, I'm not sure why it would make sense not to at least look further into it for potential implementation.
would it be possible that we would have to have, would DEP or whoever would put stricter limits on us than what's coming out of our current water treatment sewage plant? I mean, wouldn't we have to meet the same things that they're doing? And why would it be any more or less than what they have to do with the same stuff?
It could be different based on your final discharge point for it's called an outfall permit, basically, or an outfall number. And it depends on the receiving body of water. So the base flow for the sewage plant is much higher. And so typically they're able to have a higher discharge limit. If it's a protected stream, if the base flow during the summer is lower, then they might have different or more strict permit limits. And oftentimes you have to go through a waste load allocation for your particular receiving stream to determine what your specific limits might be. And so that can be a part of the permitting process. And so, we've done this before in the state of New York and other places. And that's, if you have good regulators, oftentimes they will give you an idea of what your limits might be. And then we can back calculate to determine what it would take our system to be able to treat it. Otherwise, sometimes you get into the chicken and egg where they'll ask, well, what can you treat it to? And we can say, well, we can have a 2-acre or 15-acre system. And what does it need to be treated to? So.
Right. Yeah. So one of the other options would be though to create an outfall directly into the ocean, as opposed to discharging to a stream. I mean, that was one of the other things I thought about. Where it is, I don't know, but that is ultimately another option, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Are there any of these systems local to us for comparison or no?
I would have to talk to Mark and have him look through his database. Certainly there are going to be wetland treatment systems around. There aren't as many wetland systems to treat leachate because usually folks need a lot more parameters and it's more difficult to meet. Like I said, there are certain things that we can't remove, total dissolved solids, and I forget what the numbers are, David, with your TDS, but sometimes if it's too salty, you won't be able to get a discharge permit, and we simply can't remove that. And so because of that, oftentimes wetlands aren't considered. But in an older closed landfill where the water is fairly clean to start, that's where you can use the system for ultimate final discharge. Where I'm seeing a lot more interest in wetlands these days is simply folks are getting cut off or they have large surcharges from the wastewater treatment plant. And if they can drop ammonia down, then they're able to stay with their current treatment plant. That's not the case here. We're looking for a final discharge permit. And that's the same as it is in the Bahamas system that we have. And so I'm not sure where the closest system would be with leachate. Like I said, they're a little bit farther and few in between simply because of a final discharge and wetlands not being able to remove all the compounds of concern, but they may not be a concern in your case.
Thank you. Well, final question for me is, in your experience in doing these systems, do you see that these potentially could qualify for local, state, or federal funding? That type of thing?
I have not done much grant work because almost all of my projects have been within private industry. And so I'm definitely not someone to consult for any real information. I can tell you systems don't get a whole lot greener than engineered wetlands and leveraging biology and things like that. So I know with some of the bills that were recently passed in the US Congress and leaning towards green, there's a decent chance for it. And we could even look at incorporating solar for some of your power for the blower, and that might qualify a certain percent of the project to be eligible for a grant. But I can't honestly say that I have much experience with that to give you good guidance. One of the guys that we just brought on board is pretty certain that we should be able to get different grants for some of our systems, but he and I haven't talked a whole lot about wetlands yet, so I don't know. I'm not sure if any of your towns have grant specialists that could research that. If you guys can offset costs, absolutely. Let's look into what are the options, but I can't give you a great answer on that.
Understood. That's fair enough. Thank you.
Mhm.
So Brad, when I first called you, I was trying to talk you into looking at this project, and you told me that you don't even mess around with something that doesn't look like it has a lot of potential to work. You basically said if it isn't a home run, we don't do it.
Right, I turned down projects, certainly.
Yeah, so, the leachate quality, in your experience of looking at the leachate quality and what needs to be done to get it to kind of discharge level, based on our current permit, or even maybe a more stringent permit, do we have a really mild leachate or a very clean leachate, so to speak, in regards to what you've seen and what you've treated in the past? And
Sure. Yeah, I would say that your leachate is very mild, fairly benign relative to what we see in other sites we have with the foam fractionation system. I'm only referencing that because I've seen a lot of leachate chemistry recently with all of our demonstrations, but we've had ammonia to almost 4,000 milligrams per liter, COD to 27,000 milligrams a liter, and another one in our reject that we processed that was over 80,000 milligrams a liter. We've had total dissolved solids up to 51,000 milligrams per liter. And so some of those are extremes, but I see a lot of leachate from landfills all around the country. And if I were to put you on a bell curve of where you're at, you would be on that downslope on the first side with respect to your level of contaminationness, if I want to make up a word. My kids always like that. So yeah, I would say that you don't have strong leachate, and based on what we've seen so far in your current limits, that we have a high level of confidence that this would work. I'm always looking for fatal flaws and why I would think it wouldn't be a home run, because we're a small company, and if we have a project that fails, it's significant for us. And so it's in everyone's best interest that we only take projects that we're very confident in. So what I would say is what we know right now looks like a very solid match. And if we dig into it farther and we were to get different permit limits, the chances are still pretty good that we would be able to meet them, but we won't know until we actually have those limits, of course.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Granley? No, we're all set. Thank you very much.
thanks for the short notice.
For your presentation. I know it's short notice, but this is very informative for us.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure. If any follow-up questions come up, y'all know how to get a hold of me, and happy to answer them or jump on another call if you need it. And Mark would have definitely been on the call, but he's actually on a plane as we speak. He's coming back home. He was just on a test for us in Vermont, and then I think he visited some of his elderly parents, and now he's on his way back home. But he's the real deal on being a wetland specialist. There's a guy named Scott Wallace. Mark is a protege of Scott Wallace, and Scott's one of the two primary authors of the Bible for wetland treatment systems. And so we definitely have a strong team, and we can figure out objectively whether or not we can meet whatever limits might come up. And if we can't, we'll tell you.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your interest. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Wow.
Pretty good.
He's a little more believable than the guy trying to sell fiber right.
He is. He is.
Yeah.
So,
Craig Stewart follows there.
Yeah, that's it.
obviously, it would be to our advantage to be able to do something
Oh, my God.
with the leachate, other than pump it over to the treatment plant.
So we need 2 acres, right?
I would say, that's what I get out of it.
Yeah, that was what they decided. I think we need more, actually. We need a little more, but we have the property
Oh, yeah, but where are we gonna put it?
behind the land.
Over on the, what's that?
Lily Pond Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
We have those two parcels right here.
We send it to the person that didn't come to the meeting.
and you're gonna discharge it, and we're thinking about discharging it,
I'm just.
it where?
Hold on. I think-
On site, right?
I don't think we would know. That would be the,
I didn't hear the question.
Where would we
Discharge.
discharge it?
Yeah.
I wanted to split the baby. I wanted to send it to like half to Rockport, half to Camden. I think that politically is the wisest thing to do. But he was telling me that it's better to pick one spot, and it happens to go through if we put it into our current leachate pond, that would go towards Camden.
Okay.
So,
Hold on.
so,
I thought the whole point of this was to be able to put it in the stormwater drain.
well, it is, but a lot
goes
of
to a
people
stream that goes down Belmont Brook.
goes down Belmont Brook,
Ave.
across Belmont Avenue, and then goes down to
To the
basically
Lock
to
Marina
the Lock Marina, and it would discharge at the Lock Marina.
or the condos.
So this was the part I was telling you about the political part, this is the part of like, you can see how that could be, perceived to be maybe a problem, right? It's just,
You don't know if that should be continuously said.
it's not,
What's that?
The thing about it being a political problem,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, I think we can,
well, it's a reality of any decision.
Yeah, it's gonna play into it.
it would be the quantity. In Camden, the issue is the quantity, because there are so many stormwater problems over there. And Audra did say at one point, like, over her dead body, is any water gonna come, more water gonna come, or something like that. Oh, right, you have that,
Personally,
your job.
what I think,
I forgot.
right, that's personally what I think is if that ever became an issue, is that the capital costs of including a line going straight to the water would be the best.
Yeah, I thought that already went, it doesn't happen now.
We could wrap it up into an improvement of the current stormwater line going wherever, right? We could improve, we could take it down Lime Rock Street, let's say, and maybe use a system, like part of our system that already exists. And then maybe Midco Solid Waste would have to fund like a part of it that would take it from there to a discharge point. You know what I mean? Which then doesn't bring it down a brook or anything.
Right.
And then it changes our discharge limit because it's going into the ocean, not into a stream.
So arguably, could that actually make the design less expensive?
No, it will make it'll make the capital cost
Yeah,
slightly
yeah.
more expensive, but the way you sell it is that we would be making stormwater improvements to the Camden system to get it to the discharge point.
But would a discharge permit be more lenient if it's going directly to the
Probably.
So maybe that there's a cost savings there.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
That's,
I mean, people don't love stuff coming out of a pipe at Lake Beach either, so, I mean.
Yeah.
Didn't he basically say that, it all depends on what where it's discharged?
Yeah.
We already need to do the North Quarry. The
What's
one
that?
the one that we're saying, the North Quarry,
Where it's super full.
so we need to pump the North Quarry as leachate now.
as, no.
I mean, not leachate, excuse me, sorry, that was a big mistake.
Stormwater, I'm gonna say, what are you?
So where are you gonna pump that
Stormwater,
in?
right.
Oh, see, I thought there was
Where are you
already
pumping that
drained.
in?
Well, that, what the plans in the past have said was there was gonna go to the stormwater pond.
Which goes to,
Same area.
there's a little brook, like wetlands that go in between Linden Lane and
Yep.
then it goes underneath and then it comes out on this brook at Jacobs Avenue. But we have that stormwater pond from the Greenfield subdivision. That's failed too, that has to be addressed, but
Where does the stormwater drain run down, Lime Rock? Where does that go?
it goes to Jacobs and then like past Tibbetts.
Yeah,
And then it goes, turns, it becomes a stream again.
That's,
Oh, yeah.
oh, that's why, that's.
And so
that's
it comes
why.
like, it goes underground and then it comes back up and goes Jacobs out.
Show you
winds
exactly.
yeah.
around. Here, I can show you on the,
No further than that, that's what I was thinking. I didn't
The
know.
problem is, how many gallons are you talking here?
30 gallons a minute.
That's a lot of water.
or 50 right now, right?
That's a lot of water.
Well, I think it's 35, 40 gallons a minute, depending on the, it is, but it isn't.
Well,
You know,
depends,
It's that much,
right, every minute,
just continuous, that
Right.
much continuous.
it's a lot of water.
Yeah, if you're collecting it, but I mean, if you're watching it go by, it's not really a lot, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess my question is it gonna work? You know, you think you can make it work?
That's why we're having a workshop.
The political part of it comes back into play. You know,
Well, but the savings should
Right.
neutralize
I
any.
was thinking
Right.
the
The
same.
majority of the political concern. What is Dave, what is the next step to see?
So Brad had written down the next steps on the handout I gave you, that was his email. So I think part of what I can do without really getting totally engaged with, them is talking with the stormwater person about what they would want as next steps.
So is there any provisional cost, if, like you say, you gotta come and actually,
Oh, we're gonna have to pay this guy to do all this work up front.
right up front, oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, you gotta, no one's gonna do all this work for free.
what are you talking about now?
The engineering.
Well, this guy-
Initial-
That's what I was wondering, if he's gonna come look at it, he's giving us a price, but is it gonna be, upfront costs? So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna.
You're paying for his
upfront.
brain. It's vast.
What you have to do is you have to probably kind of talk with the DEP about the stormwater. I see, the nice part about it is you're not really dealing with the landfill people, you're dealing with the stormwater people.
Yeah.
So, I could talk with them and say, all right, what am I gonna have to do to do this? And can you tell me what the parameters roughly could be? And they'll say, you don't even bother, or they'll say, this is a good idea. I think
That's a good start.
I think that's
So are
the,
we gonna have to start there, Dave, and when are we gonna start this project, and do we need permission from the DEP to start it?
well.
And are they gonna allow us to do what we'd like to do?
What I would do is I would talk with the stormwater person and say, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. I think that we probably wanna put some money aside for some of the work of the interaction between Brad and her to upfront, so that they can kind of talk things out and say, all right, are you gonna let us do this, basically? Is this something we can work on and pursue? And if she looks like she says yes, then I think that, we move forward and take a next step with getting into an agreement with him with some deliverables that say X, Y, and Z and what the costs of those are. I think you budget those costs, and then, based on the results of those, then you either move forward or you bail out. So, you know, a lot of these things aren't guaranteed, you know, you're gonna have to pay somebody to kind of look at this stuff, but if these guys are doing this all over the private industry everywhere, I'm gonna just say that's probably worthwhile. It's gonna boil down to whether the DEP in Maine, just the stormwater people are gonna let us do this, I think personally. I think that's really what it is.
So obviously, we don't have to vote on, and we can't vote on anything tonight. But is that something you can find out for our next meeting so that we can have that on an agenda, or no?
No, I think if anything, at the most, you could probably say that you give me authorization to spend X amount of money. If negotiations with DEP seems positive.
Do we have the money? Do we?
Yeah, so not knowing, I'm just wondering.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying $100,000 or anything, you know, like, what are my incidental costs of working with this guy? I have to have some money to pay for
Oh, that's
Because I
what I
did-
mean, do we have the money
that.
available?
Well, I didn't budget doing this.
Right.
That wasn't something I budgeted doing. This was something I was working on, and then I wanted to talk with everybody at the workshop about to see if this is something we should pursue. We don't have to do anything. We can just.
No, but if we go budget, we gotta have, that's what I'm saying, do we have the money? I mean, it'll have to be budgeted. For the following year, but
I would consider it part of closing costs.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
I would-
Could you do
I would
that?
Totally pull, we either draw down, take a little money off a loan, or we would sell, or we would take cash out of the closing funds. This is for closing.
Right.
We are pre-planning the closing, which needs to be happening now. We can't wait 5 to 7 to 14 years. It needs to be happening
And it
now.
has to, and there is no, is it going to happen?
Yeah,
It has to happen.
yeah,
I was
it's
gonna
not a
say,
choice. This has to
This is
happen.
what's gonna,
yeah.
I'm just saying, this
Yeah.
ultimately is the end goal.
Right.
If you don't do this,
No,
you're
no,
gonna be in
This
trouble.
is, that we are pre-planning the closing. So these are closing funds as far as I'm concerned.
And isn't this as far as you worried about selling feature, isn't this the greener option? Not only to sell to DEP, but to the public as well. It's cheaper, greener, everything,
Right, yeah.
everything about this plan is.
Right.
Well, I mean, that is something we all need to be on the same page with when we talk about this. And like Allison's kind of scolding me about saying, she's right, I should be
This is
careful.
awesome.
Yeah.
I should be careful how I say it, because I want to be transparent with you folks that the reality is we need to be prepared to answer that question.
And well, my favorite line is, well, if you're willing to write the check, we'll do what you want. So if somebody kind of pushes back, kind of like what happened with RES. I said, well, if somebody doesn't want this, then write a check. Somebody's writing a check. So. Exactly. So that's what happens. You say, well, if you don't like it, I can't keep going back to towns for the next 50 years asking for $500,000. You can write the check and we'll put it in a trust fund if you're willing to put up 5 million today.
The way I agree with you. The way I look at this is that we can design the system to be as effective as we want it to be.
Yeah.
So if we want it to be more robust than the treatment plant, we can put a little more money into it. We're still gonna be saving money in the long run. Yeah. So that's just another way.
Yeah, I always hit them in the pocketbook.
It's gonna save a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, definitely.
Because at some point, the towns are gonna say, yeah, the voters are gonna say, we're not doing this, we're done.
Yeah, right.
It can just sit there fallow and the water.
That's
can
what will
overflow.
happen.
Right, because at some point, people are gonna say, we're not doing it.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
So
especially
we
the
need
wrong
a-
fucking
we need a
waste
valid
water
solution.
solution.
This is a valid solution.
We'll
I
be
was
sending
thinking
that
a similar
Yeah,
system.
so
I
you
had
can
found
see the
myself, so
rates coming up, you know.
I'm happy to
Yeah,
see
sure.
it. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's part of the closing.
What do you think?
plan.
David, what do you think? Dave? You're thinking-
He's on vacation.
It's certainly worth pursuing to the next step and the next step until you find a hurdle that is
Right,
insurmountable.
Yeah.
I mean, the initial approach has to be to the DEP, because we have a stormwater permit. And how, assuming they consider this stormwater, what's our discharge limit going
Yeah,
to be?
right.
And then we're gonna have discussions with the town of Camden accepting it or looking at it.
That would
what
be the biggest thing,
implications are
if they
there.
put a limit on it, I mean, what do we do with the stuff we can't discharge at that point?
So-
Do we have to have a retention to save it, or how does that work?
No, I mean, they're either gonna let us do this and make the system treat it to the level we need it to, or they're gonna say no.
Oh, okay.
But the now, you just look at the differences between a discharge permit with industrial activity and a discharge permit without industrial activity. And our facility in Midcoast is a district, we have a stormwater license with industrial activity. And there, the industrial activity is chipping wood. You know, I mean, that's really not an industrial activity. I mean, it is, but it's not like a really polluting type of industry.
Yeah.
So we've already got a discharge permit for industrial activity. And I mean, it's not a stretch to say that, you know, if they let you do that, why wouldn't they let you do this? As long as you're doing something to treat the water to the level that you need to. I don't, there might be a law out there that says you can't do this in the state of Maine. I don't know that. I would think you would know that.
One way to find out.
Right. But they want us to do this stuff. They want us to figure out a way to treat this stuff forever.
Yeah,
And honestly, they can't expect you to send it to the treatment plant forever.
I mean, it's overflowing into the streets of Camden right now. I mean,
Right.
ideally, if we could get this amount of water out of the Camden system,
Exactly.
then we could maybe have room for working with, you know, actual wastewater, like, or dare I say, Rockport, that would need to be, I mean,
I just said.
they want everybody to figure things out, and I'm almost thinking that right now would be a time they would have more incentive to help
Yeah,
get, you know, because it's the same pump station that leachate from the landfill goes to right now. That's Bayview Street. It goes down, that's like a really
Yeah.
big problem area.
You show on this, on here where the landfill is and then kind of show them where it goes.
Where the water goes, or where the
Yeah.
leachate, or the sewer lines, or the stormwater?
Well, you can show the stormwater, I think is more of what we were talking about.
Yeah, so,
So maybe zoom it in a little bit.
what-
Okay.
I have to wait 10 minutes for it to be dropped. That's what always happens to me.
so. This is kind of like a wetland thing. This is just a natural wetland here. We have this is the Rockport side, and then this is a parcel that we own, that Midco Solid Waste owns, that's located in Camden. And that's all kind of like wet too. There's this, for some people might know this, there's this rock road that actually connects Camden and Rockport all the way back here that people used to use as a walking trail, but so then right now, this is right, is that right, Jake? This is our stormwater pond, or this is?
That is.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, and so then it goes like this, and then it goes through this little stream here.
So I guess you put it in the retention pond first and let it drip around the retention pond
That was what I was,
into the brook.
that's, because that's what the permit says we do now.
Yeah.
So why would we change it, you know?
No, no, that's, I just want,
They would just be making us test different stuff at the end of it,
right,
I'm thinking.
yeah,
So then it goes underground here, and we do have some flooding issues here during, when we get a lot of water, but maybe it would be possible to not pump, you know, during high water. Then it goes underground here, and then this is Jacobs Avenue.
yeah,
And so it kind of goes, and you can see it comes back out as like a stream. And then winds its way around Jacobs Ave. And then all of this is like a stream. Then it goes, this is Belmont, right?
Yeah.
So then has problems here because really just because these people have created this like tiny little canal instead of a regular stream. And then it's all like a stream like this going down behind to the intersection of Fry and Chestnut. And then it goes underneath Fry Street. Want me to zoom in more? or-
Well, what I was thinking, if you go back to where you were.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying this is what we would do, but let's say that became like a no-go. The other thing we could do is invest in fixing this right here.
yeah,
What street is that?
That's
Lime
Lime Rock.
Yeah.
and that's what I thought, that's goes straight down to the ocean, why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Well,
I thought there was already something there. I guess it'd be an expense to put in. I know what you're saying there, but.
It goes underneath these people's property and exits, I went and investigated that, exits, through a little hole in their seawall, which does, I mean, it's town infrastructure.
I mean, I'm sure we must have some kind of a prescriptive easement at this point to put water there, you know.
So,
Or there's rock, I mean, the other, we're like on this threshold between two watersheds. The other part goes to Lily Pond, of course.
now, like cleaning the ponds there. What would you do with that sludge? Is that something that you have to?
See, I didn't envision what he had as a pond. The way I see that, I would rather, depends on the cost and depends on the time it takes to manage something like that. But what I was thinking is they have little physical chemical systems that like the odor control building, you could put it in there.
Yeah.
And that would take the iron out. And you end up with a small amount of cake sludge, you know, you have a sludge press, it's like this wide, this high, and it has like these different little filters almost, and then you basically, you open it up and you move it over, and then there'll be like, you take the thing out and you scrape the cake out, where it's just like it almost looks like compacted sand.
Yeah.
And you don't get a lot of that, you know, you're not getting a huge amount of that. So you use a polymer usually, and usually use, you know, hydrogen, sodium hydroxide, maybe a little sulfuric acid, little small amounts. And it's basically a chemistry thing. They tell you, this is the chemistry of what it needs to be. You monitor it, and you have little gauges that say it has to be at this pH for this to work. And you can have that kind of system. It doesn't take a lot of technology, and it doesn't take a lot of room. His was more of a natural system. So he was talking like a big pond.
Right.
And,
Well, that's why I was wondering, we could dispose of that where it's.
I mean, I'm gonna guess that would have to be a permitted waste. You'd profile it, and then you'd have to send it to Nordwalk or any, but we're not, I don't think that's gonna be a huge part of our waste stream. You know, that's all part of treatment, right? Because we're sending, so when we send this stuff to the wastewater treatment plant in Camden, that's why some of our costs are high, because we're creating sludge, but it's more about suspended solids and BOD. Suspended solids, we don't have a lot of that. So I don't think it's gonna be a huge weight, but it's a good question. Like, how much of this are we gonna generate a year?
Yeah.
Because that's another cost. You know, we gotta figure out, what are we gonna do with it? What does it look like?
He said we're at the bottom of the curve as far as a very mild, as far as what's coming.
Right, that's what I was saying. It's not,
It's not.
right, it's mostly groundwater.
This may be a dumb question, but the iron we're taking out, is a lot of that just naturally occurring? in the
What he
groundwater?
suggested.
That's crazy then that we'd have to treat that.
Right.
That's what I was,
Right?
iron is now something that's, I mean, we all have it.
Right, it's already in, I mean, it's already
We all
probably
have it
coming out
going-
down there. in the
I'm
storm
really
drain,
confused by
so.
I mean, I have a lot of iron in my house.
Yeah, me too.
I'll tell you something, Tom Hall was manager in Rockland back almost 20 years ago when I was working here, and he says, I was at a meeting and they were like, we're gonna regulate you on the arsenic in the landfill, and he's like, your groundwater is contaminating my landfill, because it's the groundwater has arsenic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
It didn't go anywhere, but.
Once it pops through that quarry wall into your landfill.
Right.
It's yours forever.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was funny that he said that, because it's true, this is
Yeah.
just what you're saying, it's already there.
Yeah, it's not like the iron from the rusty cars that are in the landfill.
Right, exactly.
It could be something.
No,
Probably
it's
not.
in the water.
So just not to get back on the subject of this thing we're trying to build. Do we have any?
You're already building it.
No, but I never had a time, I never got a time frame. How long is it gonna take to put
This
this
is a,
all together?
this is a cost savings thing that we're trying to do for the future, at least that's
Oh,
how,
I understand.
that's how I get that. But
Realistically, if you treat me nice, you know, and.
Well, I mean, but we would want to do it sooner rather than later.
Cost savings.
No reason not to do it.
If I go through the process, and the DEP says yes, I mean, next year we're budgeting this.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that was my question.
oh, yeah.
Okay, you answered it.
It'll take longer to permit it
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
than it will to build it.
I'm sure- I'm
This
sure
is
you-
nothing to build. You'll have this built in a month.
Right.
Yeah, the permits will take longer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be all the groundwork, it's gonna be all the talking and, you know, negotiation.
It's like trying to get the permits for Robinson Drive.
Yeah,
But in the meantime, the North Quarry
That's
is
something,
like I mean, we are looking at a major budget deficit if this keeps up with this cut for this year even, depending on how we did other places. I noticed that in this document that Emery and Garrett had created from 2006, it said that they were calculating how to reduce the amount of water going into the North Quarry at that time. And they said that by like ditching on Lime Rock Street, they had reduced it by, that was when they were pumping directly from the North Quarry. But was it Lime Rock or yeah,
Union Street.
that they had reduced it by 5%, and that was $88,000 a year worth of, you know, less pumping.
Can you
and-
send this to us? I've never seen this document.
Sure, there's some of the older stuff is, I found this history that you asked them to do from 2004 too. It was really like illuminating, but all of this stuff was, oh yeah, there's little doubt the groundwater is infiltrating into JQN and, you know, it goes through all of this stuff. But it's a lot of the same thing, that 5 gallons per minute of flow removed saves the corporation about $88,000 per year. So any,
Just by ditching.
and they said, yeah, there was little.
Well, what happens is it
So
comes
the
out
fact
of,
that the ground now flow along the southern ditch of Lime Rock Street through a culvert under the site rear entrance. And then it's continuing.
So the water was getting intercepted before it got into JQN and sent down the
So-
storm system.
so they,
so you were saying pump the water, the North Quarry water.
right, but my question is, now we gotta get rid of the water in the North Quarry.
What my game plan was,
So,
I was gonna do that like on the cheap. I was gonna trench across the back exit road.
yeah,
I'm gonna put a piece of culvert or something in there. I'm gonna put a lay flat hose through there with a well pump and drop it in the quarry and
Yep.
let it rip.
yeah,
But only during.
that was my question, yeah,
That was, right, and try and bring it down during the dry weather season. Right.
yeah,
So that I give myself a little room for the winter time when the water comes.
And we can do that now without.
God knows I've been successful with that lately.
Do we need?
No, I mean, I have been actually, it's just when you get 5 inches or 7 inches of rain, it's hard to manage, but
Yeah, it all comes downhill.
I know,
What's hard
it's
about?
your fault. You sent it to me.
Yeah, that's because we're uphill from you.
well,
I'm
you know what the
sorry.
good news is, we can start pumping the North Quarry,
Yeah,
and then we'll have justification for pumping it out and dumping it.
Right,
Because the DEP would say, well, wait a minute, what are you guys doing?
so this situation happened in Rockland, it's almost like deja vu, and we had the quarry, you know, when you go across Lime Rock Street, there's another quarry right on the other
Yeah.
side right there, it was Ken Rich's quarry, do you remember that?
yeah,
And it was, the same thing was happening. And we just pumped it, right, we just put a pump in there, we threw it in, we pumped it out, and if they wanna call it a landfill, then it's, or a landfill, then it's a landfill, but if they wanna call it a quarry with water, then we were gonna pump it, you know, it was one or the other.
yeah.
And we did that, and, you know, it wasn't dirty or anything, there really wasn't anything wrong with it, but
Well,
nothing ever came of that. I don't feel that same way with this situation.
Well, we have a consent agreement. No, we didn't do away with that consent agreement. did
We have language in the old documentation that talks about them letting us do this.
We do.
It,
Gibbons made that deal.
yeah, there's in some of these same files from 2006, what I found is that it was the Camden town officials that said, no, the DEP had said yes to the North Quarry pumping. But that it was dirtier then because it was getting churned up all the time, so it didn't, even though it wasn't like technically bad, it was discolored according to what this said. And so Camden town officials got jumpy, I think is the way they phrased it, and didn't wanna, you know, thought that people in Camden might object to seeing a discolored stream in their backyards, which I think is probably accurate. But we don't have that situation now.
Why was it discolored at the
I think they
time.
was dumping stuff in.
Yeah, every so often when something gets dumped in there, you'll see, even like 5 years ago, a bunch of stuff slipped in there and it turned internet,
Well, I think the problem is if you got down 30 feet,
that too.
Yeah,
you get down 30 feet, the pump started pumping, you find the difference in the water.
yeah, you used.
Yeah, it's
Quality
clean on top.
and smell.
I'm gonna work with the geologist, but I'm gonna look at when did the shift start happening, and that would be where I would bring it to. Maybe a little bit more. When did we start losing? When did we start having to pump more to keep up with
I see.
You know what I mean? I don't know what that is. They can, but they have a way of doing the modeling where they can kind of tell you, seemed like it was when it was at this elevation that it started happening. That's,
There were some lines painted on rock down there at one time.
well, we've been keeping track of everything. So we have data, we have the data, so they'll take the water level
Yeah.
data and they'll marry it with, you know, the testing results, and then they'll look at the increase in pumping on the other side, and they'll say, this is the way you should do it. And then that's what you give them if they ever ask for this. You know, it's not like you just randomly threw this thing in and set it at whatever level. There's gonna be a level it's gonna be at. There's gonna, because the water quality changes as you move from the surface down.
Mhm.
So, you know, there's a lot going on here.
Sure is.
Yeah.
I think at one point didn't we experience, like, you know how lakes turn over?
Yeah.
Didn't we experience that in the quarry at one
What are you
time?
thinking? I was thinking the same thing. I think that turned over once.
Yeah,
I think it's when they put stuff in there, I can't remember what was going on.
Well,
If they were trying to put rock in the pot, the water, and then it turned over, it made it worse, because when it rolled, the whole thing got all dirty. Whatever.
Well,
But you just stop.
yeah, the gut project stirred things up a little
I
bit.
mean, the basic water chemistry is you have spring and fall overturn, what you guys are talking about, the overturn. And what happens is water, when it's 4 degrees Celsius, is at its most dense point. And when the ice melts, and then the denser water is at the top and it melts, it goes to the bottom and it turns everything and kind of churns everything up. And then all the water becomes the same temperature from the top to the bottom. And then what happens is as summer rolls around and things heat up, it starts to stratify. And then that cycle happens in the fall.
Yeah, it's twice a year.
Right. But I don't see that. I don't know if that's-
Is it, would we be able to talk to the DEP prior to our meeting on the 24th, or is it just?
No, because our meeting with the stormwater person is on the 30th. And I'm gonna be honest with you, we're a little behind on the stormwater stuff.
Okay,
It's just the way things have been.
so this would be good. I still think this ought to be on the agenda for our next meeting.
I agree.
Just for more
Yep.
communication. I mean, we have a few board members that aren't here. I feel that Bob would have some input on this as well,
Mhm,
even though he may not be with us too much longer.
mhm.
But I feel that should go on our agenda, so.
You want
agree with the
this on the agenda?
Yeah, just as a talking point, yeah, as a talking point,
Okay.
maybe, you know, you or, hey, I want to touch base on this, some of you missed this, but here's the information and.
No vote required,
No,
we're just
there's no
talking,
vote.
but, you know, what you could do, and you could instruct me to proceed with the.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you know, that would be probably the recommendation of the board is for the director manager to proceed with the DEP.
Yeah.
Hold up, sorry. Are we gonna need to, in terms of potential votes, don't we need to find out what the initial cost would be with
I think he
with
wrote,
this company?
I think he gave us, did he? No, he
Not
didn't,
the-
he didn't break it down.
Not construction, but just in order to be able to have them do the work that they need to do.
And we have to go to the town still and get a
Yeah.
vote.
Okay.
The town will have to vote on it, right?
For which component?
Well.
For the stormwater stuff,
Yeah,
or for the leachate?
yeah. I don't think so.
I don't think we need to hold the town.
I think what you do is you instruct me to go to the DEP and say, what about this? And they say, well, we're gonna want X, Y, and Z. I take that, I give it to Brad, I said, they want X, Y, and Z. He says, okay, this is how much it costs to figure out X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Then I bring that back to you, you say, okay, here's the money for X, Y, and Z. It's gonna be that simple. That's gonna be how it goes.
That's not a finished product, but
That's to get going.
Here's the money to get going.
Here's to get
Tell
going.
us what we're gonna
Like
need.
Dave was saying, to get to the next step.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea.
That's what I think. That seems to be the only thing you really can do.
I agree.
So now you get the easy one,
All right, so our other talking point,
right?
number 2. What was that, Dave?
I honestly think, that.
Where we send our trash for the next 20 years or?
Yeah, I mean. I don't like sending the waste to just straight to a landfill. That's my personal feelings about it. I know everybody doesn't, I don't like the instability of the MRC.
That's an understatement.
But the thing is that it's too big to fail.
It's
That's,
not, yeah, it's
I
not.
mean, I'm not saying it's failed, I'm saying it's too big to fail. Like saying it won't fail, that's what I'm saying.
Only because they'll just keep raising the fees so that it can't, right? I mean,
That's what.
Right.
Josh?
This would be a very dumb question, but what is the downside to sending everything to a landfill forever? Why would we not want a landfill?
Well, without going into all the details, I mean, there is a waste hierarchy that's been developed. And it incorporates in all those thoughts, because they say you put something in a landfill, it never goes away, okay? The other thing is that all landfills ultimately fail.
What do you mean by that?
The leachate collection systems that they're built upon ultimately fail. And then they start contaminating groundwater, and then they become pollutants to the environment. They're taking natural resources that could be harvested as opposed to disposed of and not reused, which then in turn requires you to get more natural resources, which cause more environmental problems. So just use, iron. You throw iron in the landfill or aluminum in the landfill. Now you gotta go and make more aluminum. Well, how do you get more aluminum? You gotta mine more areas to get bauxite ore. And then you take bauxite ore and you get you process the bauxite ore and you create water pollution. It's a vicious cycle. And the only way of breaking that cycle is minimizing your waste stream, not just throwing it all in a landfill. That's the major environmental reasons. Landfills give off greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are ozone depletion, major ozone depletion chemicals. Methane is like exponentially more destructive to the ozone than CFCs, which we banned. So, or reduced in aerosol cans. That's another reason. The fact that, what's another one?
Josh, do you want to Google this later? Like, are you like?
I mean, I could go on.
I just think that this is helpful to
There's a lot of.
understand like the
There's
pros
a
and cons.
lot of
of land.
environmental reasons to do it.
Yeah.
Landfills are finite, and we only have 2 really major landfills in the state. And if we just throw everything in the landfill, we're gonna have to build more landfills. Well, what's gonna happen? Someone's gonna have another landfill in their backyard, which is another source of contamination. Those are the arguments, or you could say, hey, this is a business decision and I don't really care about that part. It all ends up going to the landfill anyway, and none of this stuff works, and I don't believe in recycling, and, there's both camps out there. And it just depends on which camp you're in. And I've been in a place before where people decided that they don't want to send everything to a landfill for that reason, and I've been to other places where they don't care. You look at Thomaston, or not Thomaston, but Owl's Head, Thomaston, they chase the dog. They go wherever it's the cheapest. Rockwell, on the other hand, did not want to send anything to the landfill. They wanted it all be incinerated. So it's the people in the community are ultimately, you have to think about, well, what do they want? Because you serve at large, but you're really representing the community. So if the community, you think, are you representing what the community's best interests are and what they want? I mean, I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse of that.
is PERT not viable because they're not competitive with the pricing anymore, or what's, because for the longest time, that was.
All they wanted, they cut back.
That was a
what
great
they were
option
doing.
because, okay, we're turning this into power. You know,
We-
it's not going in the landfill.
What happened was that when the subsidies ended,
Yeah,
it wasn't profitable for them anymore, and they were owned by a private company called USA Energy. And USA Energy had neglected probably capital improvements to the process and ran it like it was, like it was making them money, and which it was when the subsidies were there. And then when the subsidies went away, they were looking at a huge amount of capital costs. They had the MRC that pulled out, and they started fighting with them back and forth about the waste. So then they got all out of sync about how everything was working. And then they neglected more of the capital cost of running the place, only ran one boiler for a while. Now they're kind of unreliable, and it's gonna take a huge amount of money to get going again. If the state, I hate state getting involved in everything, but someone should have got involved with the MRC and then we're talking and said, listen, let's make this work. Cause this really a bad thing if this splits up, because it was a good thing the way it was.
Right, it was.
And they screwed it all up. They,
I
well,
can't believe
the
nobody
MRC,
saved
the
it.
leadership at the MRC was terrible.
yeah.
And the greed of USA Energy was horrible. And you take mismanagement on one side and greed on the other side, and what do you got? Nothing. You get people.
Yeah, like the ones in the middle take the air.
Right, that's what I mean.
But I can't believe nobody else started it up anything like that. I always thought that was,
So much
everything used to
money.
go there,
So
everything used
much
to go there, everywhere. Came
So-
from all over the state.
Taking aside all of the idealism about wanting to try to reduce our waste as much as possible and all of that stuff, which I definitely believe in and want to try new things and blah, 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 but we can argue until the cows come home about whether this plan as it is gonna work or not, and investors, let's just say we're gonna take the idea that maybe it's not gonna work, or we don't, that kind of has to be irrelevant, I think, at this point. Could we get, I think we're gonna have to have maybe like a strategic and capital planning committee or somebody look a little more carefully and dig down with the MRC. What is the contract that they'd be willing to give us? Because right now, the only difference, I mean, there are all these communities, I watch the meetings every so often when I can. A lot of them are, they're going to the landfill too, like us, but they're like a bargaining unit. And so they said, a bunch of them got together, they're part of the MRC, and said, we want to go to PERC when that's possible. We don't want to be driving our stuff to Norwich Walk, we want to go to PERC. And so they have an agreement that allows them, when PERC is up and running, they go to PERC. But it's, it's through the MRC, so they maintain that like collective bargaining power. If the plant gets up and running and gets their private funder and it's working, then great, they're all gonna go and do that, and some of that will go there, and then it'll go to Norwich Walk. If it doesn't, they're all gonna be a collective bargaining unit to be able to have an agreement with the landfill. So like looking at what they can guarantee us for a contract, no matter where we end up, like we have to look like the worst case scenario contract for different times. So I would think I would need that in order to be able to give direction, because the same thing is true with waste management. Waste management has said right now that they're, if I understood correctly before, they can't give a contract beyond 10 years right now, because they don't know if they're even going to exist as a landfill. So that puts us in, we should consider that a little bit too. And then worked into their contract, which I hate, is this like extortion kind of where they, every time they put in there that if any of their costs go up associated with like the state, then they pass all of those along to us. So then when, legislation comes down the pipe that might increase their costs, that might ultimately be good for the state of Maine, like not allowing the outside waste or things like that, then they tell all the municipalities, you better rally your legislators so that they don't do this because it's going to increase your costs. So we don't always have a sure thing with waste management either. And because it's a landfill and the state is trying to discourage just straight up landfilling, they're trying to tax that operation in a different way than they might with the things that are higher up on the hierarchy, like incineration or this whole thing. So I mean, basically, I do think there's value in us being part of a group of towns bargaining, even if it's just to go to the landfill, but then we can't really compare it right now without knowing, like maybe MRC right now is gonna say they're not in a position to give any contracts, and then our decision will be easy.
Yep, I mean, when we did this initial look at everything, it was during the budget.
Mhm.
So, you know, I can call up the executive director and go, look, the board wants a tangible contract of what it's gonna be. Can you provide that?
Because didn't he say he would have to give us a sure thing, he would have to go to his board? Something like that. I mean, we don't have anything, right? He gives a range of like $10 per ton. It was like, it wasn't a finite
I
number.
put in I think I put in the average of what that was, but I was just looking at that number. That was 195 a ton. You know,
But what if it turns out that he's like, well, you know.
It could be-
looks like
it could
it's
be-
gonna on the higher end.
it could be
It's like-
124, which is year 10 of the contract with Waste Management. You know, I mean, that's what it could be. I don't know.
Well, we can't really make a decision until they give us a real number, right?
Right.
So isn't that the next step?
It was weird with them because they were like, you better commit to us before we commit to you, you know? It's
Yeah,
almost
they
like-
did that before.
Kind of,
I mean, that's kind of
They did
going
that
in line,
before, though.
trust me, you know?
what kind of a statement is that?
Well, it was, he didn't really, he couldn't, they have a board just like we have a board, and I think that it takes commitment by somebody for them to move forward with a contract, I think.
They aren't getting, they're worried about securing what's
Right.
going on in the future. They're not out
Soliciting,
recruiting
no, they don't want
new
to,
towns right now. So they were like, oh, you want to join? You know, you want to know what it would be if you joined? I don't think they're getting like they're. But what was interesting is that it seemed like Waste Management, as soon as the MRC had made their latest announcement, where they brought that partner in to give a presentation, all of a sudden,
we got
the guy from
letters.
Waste Management was like trying to get us into a contract. It was kind of,
He knows that we are on the fence.
I mean, that was kind of a made up deadline anyway, it seemed like.
Well, they gave me another month, so it
Yeah.
wasn't a real deadline. Apparently,
So obviously, this is pretty important,
right?
and we've got a little bit of breathing room.
We don't
but
have to
not
do
really.
anything.
But not really. But for me, if you look or remember what happened the last time we had to do this, I feel that we've got to have buy-in from the towns, but we need options too. I feel we need more than just two options for us to consider.
You don't have to.
We don't.
don't have to.
You only have two options.
Hmm.
Maybe, I mean, maybe we could. if
We could
want-
throw the Canada one in there, and it's gonna be a crazy number, you know? I mean, EcoMaine said we don't have the capacity. They came right out and said, no, we don't have the capacity, you know?
Yeah, but see, look, years ago, look at the promises they made back when they wanted us to join on to that. And that all fell through.
I can't believe that MRC, they must want people to come into the fold.
And they've got to be able to talk to us, so they've got to be able to give us some type of,
I think we need to talk with them again, and we need to get something more firm from them, so
Yeah.
you guys can make a better decision.
Yeah,
Right.
I think ultimately, you don't have to do anything. I think you could wait a year and wing it. You know, I mean, by then you may have a better idea. The downside to Waste Management is they want a surcharge built into this year's cost, this next year's budget. Did you see that?
Yeah.
As
That
a-
was tricky.
So we could say, no, we're not doing the contract and pay our current rate that we were contracted with initially, which the difference is our current pricing is, so to take us to 6/30/24 is 70.99. It's a 4.5% interest, percent increase. If we, I think, how does that work here? If we. Sorry. I don't have the number right in front of me, it looks like, but I guess what I'm saying is that in order for us to get the 10-year deal, he's gonna charge us more in the last year of this deal.
Because they're trying to make it the labor and the
Right.
increased inflation costs that they're eating now. So basically they're saying, okay, well, we're writing you an 11-year contract by rewriting the current year.
Exactly.
Yeah, yep.
Waste management though has had like incredibly profitable
Of course they
year.
have.
So what I'm saying is, I guess, I don't know if this is much of an upside, but the upside is that you could just stick with your contract to the end of next year, 2024, not sign the 10-year deal. But God knows they're gonna punish us for that when we come to negotiate. They're gonna be like, well, we told you guys, and you didn't want to do it, and now you're, or the MRC could like pull through and it could be a good deal. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a gamble.
Josh?
I haven't really been following this since back in 2016, when we all talked about this. So why did Coastal Resources shut down? Did it run?
Why
at
don't you,
first?
there's like a whole thing that they just presented about that.
Yeah, you
that
should watch that. I sent
Oh,
you.
really?
I'll send it to everybody. It's kind of gives a not so rosy. It was the best I'd seen them do with being like, they admitted there were some problems with the fiber eye guy basically, and maybe some.
Well, because no one did any homework on the fiber I got.
Well,
Here
the
was
technology is working out okay, but yeah, they say.
100 and whatever communities signed in to millions of dollars and nobody did their homework. Almost nobody. And that's a fact, because I called down there and talked to a bunch of the people that dealt with him in his little pilot plant down in Virginia. And everyone that dealt with him said, don't believe a word he says. Nothing ever has come true. And then if you Google him and go years back from when he started out in Iowa, and you read the stories of everything and to where it starts and then go through, nothing ever came to fruition. He filled his pockets getting 100 and some communities to.
Sell an
Where is
idea.
he now?
Well, the thing is, though,
Nobody
that
knows.
because they defaulted, the MRC actually got this major asset for like pennies. It's all, I'm not arguing with what you're saying, but it does, the plant did work. The front end of it, it all works. It's like off the shelf stuff that just extracts all the recyclable materials. And that's why they do have interest in from another company buying it. So
It's a dirty. move.
it's shocking that they chose somebody that is so, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. And all I'm saying is there's about an hour and a half thing on YouTube where they go through, they give the history of why they're where they are, what the situation is, what their options are, and then some new partner comes in and this guy explains a little bit. You can.
Is that a YouTube video?
Could you
Yeah, I
send
can
that?
send it. You can just listen.
I mean,
to
I
it.
think that's good for everybody to look at, you know what I mean? I think that explains.
Well, I mean,
all.
the whole concept as I recall, was a great idea.
It is a good
Oh,
idea.
okay,
But it never
but the problem still is, it was the world's first. That's what we were sold. The whole plant, the totality of it was not happening anywhere in the world.
Well, no, there was 3 processes and they were all happening somewhere, but not all together.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And okay, let's pick Hamden, Maine. And I always thought, that's kind of a strange place. Everywhere in the world, this hasn't been done, but let's pick Hamden, Maine. And then bingo, after 1 year, well, it isn't coming together because we had a cold winter. And I'm thinking to myself, now, weren't these really smart people that were supposed to design this and they not even factor in?
No, that's not what happened.
So if they-
Well, that's
They
one of the
got sued by
excuses.
PERC. They got sued. It was, there was a lot that, right as they basically ran out of money, their permit got held up because of a lawsuit from PERC. And then just as the plant, they had a few months of being operational and they essentially ran out of money.
Didn't we as taxpayers give them a big bond, fund it through a big state issued bond? That
I
didn't
think it was
happen?
private investment, right?
Private investors lost.
They got screwed, but that doesn't.
I thought that they applied for one of these big something and the state basically said, well, we gotta give it to you because you need it. Because
So what
all
is
these
that?
communities.
It's called the financing,
Never.
Oh, no, that was the bonding or the financing, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a financing thing.
Yes.
But they didn't give them the money, they gave them good financing.
Right.
Okay.
So our next step on this,
Right.
don't have to do anything, but needs to be nice to talk to them, don't you think? Can we?
Sure, yeah, I mean.
Can we actually, can the board meet with their board? Would that be, is that useful?
Well, I mean, why
I'm
not?
so busy right now. Why don't you just, like, I think we should direct, what are you looking for from us?
I think you want to tell me that I need to contact the MRC executive director and ask for a tangible contract.
Yes, an actual number,
With,
better number.
with a number.
Yeah, we will need to do that at our meeting.
No,
We can't do that here.
well, I think I should do that so that at the meeting you at least could possibly have it. I'm not guaranteeing anything. But I can do
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
I don't think waiting is, and then I think what I need to do is I need to contact Pete LaChapelle and see if I can buy some more time for them.
Okay.
That's what I think is the most smartest thing to do at this
Sounds
point.
good. Is there anything else that you've got that we haven't already covered?
No, I mean, I think that this was the first one we've had like this. I think it's smart
Great.
to
I think it's
kind of have a good idea
Yeah.
to talk about things. You know, we need to do this because you can't, it's like other topics where there's only one person that's making all the decisions in a bubble. Ultimately, not everybody's gonna agree with them all. You know what I mean? I'm
Get it?
I'm not thinking of anything that just happened, but I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah. I mean, good.
With all the things going on, are you finding time enough to run both departments?
It's been challenging this past week, last week and the week before. When we have a natural disaster, it messes me up. You know what I mean? When you have a ton of water, it messes me up on both ends. But I told you, I'm setting up that facility to run like it's running now and getting Vinny's doing good. I mean, I don't know if that facility's running pretty good right now. You gotta admit, it's looking good. The hybrid thing is getting closer, almost ready to go. The crew is doing, they're doing pretty good. I think we've kind of turned the corner on the safety stuff. I want to start including Vinny on some of the financial aspects of it because he's all operational, right? So he's got a good base on how operationally things work, but he doesn't have any concept to how the money side of it's tied into it. And once you learn the money side of it, then all of a sudden the operational side seems to make sense. And you're like, oh, gee, maybe I shouldn't buy, 40 boxes of gloves every week, for everybody. You know what I mean? It's that kind of, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean? And now, and he's eager to learn and he's listening. So it's all working. That's amazing. Beth does all that. She's doing double duty to pull out the stuff that I need together to get things for me that I don't have to do. And I can just stand there like with minimal effort and kind of make these things happen. And in my spare time, do this stuff. So it's working. If you want something different, let me know. I'll walk away. I don't.
No, please no.
No, that's a very good question.
Just a question, I mean,
And
at some point in time, if you become overwhelmed,
I'll say
it's
so.
two jobs.
Please click Camden and just.
Well,
my question,
Yeah.
We need to be aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
my question, just to spin off that, which was a very good question, and thank you for answering us. Is there anything that the board should be taking on that would actually make it a little bit easier for you? So, you know what I mean? I mean,
It's when we talk here in this
meeting
meeting,
every month.
when we talk in these discussions,
Yeah.
all sticking together with what we walk away with and not like going out there and saying, hey, Dave's trying to send all the water around Camden,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying anybody's gonna do that, but that's helpful, not doing that. You know what I mean? Not spreading something that's misinformation. And I'm not saying anybody does it. Some people do it unintentionally, but being in unison with what our objective is, as long as everybody agrees. If you don't agree, let's talk about it here and know that we all disagree, and then we all are aware of that.
Well, even if it's split, but you get the general vibe as to whatever the topic is, what the sort of the consensus is
Right.
as to what people are feeling.
Right, I don't want to do anything you guys don't want to do.
Well, I mean, maybe you do, and maybe we should, but you know, I mean, it's okay to disagree.
It is, but you don't want to undermine the
Right.
manager
Right.
outside of here, because that weakens me, and then I can't do the other stuff. So, you know, keeping me strong is by not taking away from me, and I'm not saying anybody's doing that, but that's how you can help me.
Perfect.
It does seem good to have these conversations, just more talking, because then we get a chance to, I feel like when we go to not meeting very
Get a
often.
chance to ask that question.
Right, we get a chance to go through it rather than us like, oh, I see her in the supermarket and we can talk a little bit, and then I see somebody else, that's like our only outlet sometimes.
Yeah.
To talk about things.
Or you see
So-
something happening and say, hey, Dave, this is, you ought to look out for this. I mean, because you guys hear stuff and see stuff, I don't. You know, I know what I mean. I mean, we all gotta work together
So
here.
what venue do we say those things at?
Those are on the side, yeah. No, but-
To me, you see something,
Yeah, I mean, hey, you ought to look out, I see this could pop up as being an issue down the road. You know what I mean, stay ahead of this.
The one comment I did have this last week was, somebody went there and they're like, everybody seems so much happier.
Oh, that's a good thing.
And I said, yeah, that's a good thing.
I had a misstep, I'll be honest with you, I went to hire somebody.
Russell back.
You must have heard about this, so I had Wayne, an employee from Wayne Hill, wanted to get hired, and he had a CDL license, and he's been working with trash for 30 years. I said, geez, this guy's
Yeah.
checking all the boxes. So I'm like, I'm gonna hire him, and then of course Wayne Hill said, oh my God, I gotta pay this guy $7 more an hour to keep him, and I ended up losing him back to Wayne Hill. I mean, that was a misstep.
Oh, well, you gotta shoot.
I gotta, right,
Not your fault.
no, I gotta try, I gotta give it a shot once in a while, and it didn't work. So then luckily I didn't jigger the bottle too much, and I was able to kind of get it back going again, but find a good CDL operator that,
Well, Wayne didn't take his business somewhere else, did he?
what's that?
What do you mean?
Wayne didn't take his business somewhere else, did he?
Right, you don't have much choice, does he? That's what he could drive the rock from.
I bet you I don't get a Christmas card.
Well, I think if you're all set with what you wanted to present, then I think we're good here.
Maybe something to think about maybe if you have topics that you think are important, that we could just discuss at one of these meetings, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. It was
Yeah.
good. I know,
You did a great, Karen.
I think a more
Good job.
formal.
Good job. Thank you.
split,
Good
job.
Good job.
organized,
Thank you.
Like,
Very productive.
get a
All right.
chart of the staffing.
We have that.
Yeah, I think we should just